Welcome to this video. It's the fourth and final video of this series, putting bookend matched scales on a custom knife. This video will cover everything from gluing the handle together to cleaning up the bonding adhesive to shaping the final contours on the handle to make it comfortable and look good. If you enjoy this series, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We're all set up now, ready to go. We've got the G-Flex epoxy. I do highly recommend the G-Flex epoxy over the other epoxy out there. We've got the metal is sanded to 80 grit, the scales are sanded to 80 grit, the pins are sanded to 80 grit. I use a very, very expensive application tool. It is a plastic knife with serrations on it. Now the reason I do that, you will see when I'm applying the epoxy, you will see why I do that. I have the acetone here instead of the denatured alcohol because acetone will remove any residue from the epoxy completely, enough so that you can wipe it off with another set when you're done. Now we're going to get started. We want just a little bit, we want enough epoxy to cover both scales and both halves of the knife. Two-part epoxy has two parts. And we mix them together. I generally try to mix by folding and smashing it down. I find using masking tape as a base is just perfectly acceptable, because that way when you're done you just pull it off your table and throw it away. That's pretty evenly mixed. If you don't get it mixed up evenly, your bond will not be sufficient. So you got to mix it pretty well. Now it takes a long time for this stuff to set up. You've got over 45 minutes working time. So now I put it on the scales. You want to evenly coat the scales. You'll see the little serrations in there. That's aids in the bonding. Aids when I'm putting it onto the knife handle. The two serrations work in there. There we go. That's one scale. If you were using 5-minute epoxy, you wouldn't have time to show people what you're doing. You just put it on and glue it together and tell them about it. But that's not why I use this. I use this epoxy because it is great stuff. Certain very famous television program doesn't use this stuff because it takes forever for it to set. It takes 10 hours minimum for it to set, so that wouldn't work well for a certain popular television program. Some people are very dainty with this stuff and don't get it all over the place. Not me. I have a hard time not getting it in my ears. Now when it doesn't come through quite right, we'll fix that in just a minute. That's why you want to have an arbor press at your beck and call. Okay, that one came through pretty good, maybe a little bit more. Not quite that far. And this one didn't come through very well, so we're going to use an arbor press to push it through. And we're through even on both sides. Clean up all the excess that you get all over the place. I use ratcheting clamps that are not excessive putting pressure on, because you don't want to have more than 50 pounds of pressure per square inch on your scales, or you'll squish too much of the adhesive out.
They're sitting on top of the pins?
Yeah, they're sitting right over the pins. There's a little gap in the clamps. If you look at the clamps, the pins will sit right down in that little crease in there. Now we clean the scales up as good as we can prior to letting it cure. Reduces the amount of cleanup and sanding for after you're done. Trying to be real careful around the top edge, because that edge is 100% finished, so you don't want to have any globs of epoxy that cure onto the blade up there. And then I take a clean dry and I wipe it off. And she's ready to set off for the side and cure. Now that'll be tomorrow before it's done. We'll come back tomorrow and we'll finish that up. It's going to sit overnight, and then tomorrow it'll be totally bonded. Here it is, all set up, ready to go. We've got adhesive all over everything. We've got some adhesive on the outsides, and we've got the clamps on it. We'll remove the clamps. Sometimes the clamps do have a tendency to stick, so you may have to give them a little wiggle, but this time they were pretty good. Now, off to doing the hand sanding on the spine and on the belly. We'll get that cleaned up shortly. Here we have the 180 grit sandpaper. All we're going to do is remove the adhesive and get it set up so that it can be finished. Here we're switching to a flexible pad to get down into this contour there. Now the spine. And we continue this process through 220 grit. And then we start on with filing out the pins. We're finished with the 180 grit. We'll go to 220 and then we'll complete the handle, pins, and get the adhesive off the sides. Okay, I do cross hatch with every grit. I go one direction this way and this one's going this way. That helps to eliminate any scratches in the wood and in the steel. And that's our goal now, is just starting to clean it up and get the final shapes and the final feel and the contour. Make it pretty. Make sure to not forget doing the same thing on the pommel area. We're off to the next step. We finished this one up. We finished up with 220. There are no big sand scratches in the steel or in the wood. The adhesive's all gone, ready for the next step. And now we're going to clean up the pins, get the contour in there so it starts getting the adhesive off. And the next step will be on to a smaller belt sander. And here we go. We have it all sanded down. The pins are sanded down. The adhesive has come off the edges. The adhesive is off the center. And we've got a basic rough shape going on from the little 1-inch belt sander. Now we go ahead and start hand sanding. We start with 80 grit for the shaping and getting all the remaining adhesive off the edges and get everything set so it feels good in the hand. We do that with strips of 3/4 inch wide 80 grit sandpaper, and we use it like we're shoe shining. We'll continue this process until we have a good shape and it appears to be working and feeling the way we want it to feel. This is where we get the end product. This will continue through 180, 220, 320, 400, 600, 800, and finally 1,000 before we're done. This process takes quite a bit of sandpaper. Well, we're finished with the 80 grit, pretty much. Once you finish with 80 grit, you want to make sure that your shape is exactly what you're looking for. Because the next step is to start with 180 and then follow through all the way up to 1000 grit. And you're just removing scratches and any little slight imperfections that you might run across. And now we'll start with the 180. Checking for rough areas around the pins. With steel pins, that's the hardest thing to do, is get everything to where it feels and looks good. Now we're all finished with the 180 grit. I had to stop and take a file to the pins because they were a little bit overly proud. You could feel pretty good sized lumps on them. So now it's ready to see what the end product will look like. I use tongue oil. Really doesn't have an effect on the end product. I do let it soak in, but this is mainly to look for any imperfections and to give you some indication of what the end product is going to look like. Because if there's any high spots, large scratches, anything like that, the tongue oil accentuates them and lets you find whatever is there. Because my final inspector is very brutal with me. She looks for just the tiniest scratches. And that's what the product is going to look like. That is going to be sweet. Time to let it soak in. We've let this oil set and evaporate some of the light ends. Looks pretty good. There's some minor scratches on that side that have to come out. There's some heavier scratches right over here that have to come out. They should come out with the 220. Now, we only put one coat of oil on it and let it soak in a little bit because this is stabilized wood. And all we're doing is putting a little coating on it. If it was not stabilized, we would put a whole lot more oil on it. And we're ready to clean it up and continue sanding with 220. And we keep going until we finish up with 1000 grit before it is buffed. And I'll get you back on camera when we're down to 1000 grit. There you go. All right, we're up to 1000 grit. This is the final grit of sandpaper. Before we buff it, it's all cleaned up. There should be no major scratches. All we're doing is just putting a final finish on it before buffing. And here we go. Over the ridge. Across the pins. That should be all it needs for that side. On to the other side. Now we'll take it out of this and put it in a vise protected by wood to do the spine and the belly on this one. All right, here we are with the final on the spine and the belly. Taking any and all little scuffs out, no longer shaping anything at all. You might question why I put it in the vise. Well, time for the spine. You'll see that in just a second. Now, I match and blend the rest of the spine into where we've finished the stuff. May not be able to see that, but part of it is still dark from acidizing, and part of it is light colored from sanding. It'll all be light colored from sanding to 1000 grit. And then we will redarken it after it's buffed and cleaned up before final inspection. Now the spine is blended all the way up to a transition point. That way we can make the knife look symmetrical, attractive, and make it look like it's supposed to, we hope. Around the corner just a little bit. Ready to clean up and buff. A little bit of acetone and then buffing. I use acetone on a paper towel to clean up the blade from any waxes that I put on it for protecting it while the job was being completed. Take it, wipe off any residue from the metal. And now on to buffing. Now, we're all set up, back getting the final finish for the handle. The final finish for the handle will be to darken this back up to try and match the blade. I've already cleaned it with degreaser from Birchwood Casey, and we will put the final darkening with Permablue. It's a cold bluing compound. It's not the greatest stuff in the world because it's easy to put on. So that's what's going to be on there to make it black. We're going to darken the handle and the pins. Now, on the spine and the belly, I use a paper towel to apply the bluing, because a paper towel doesn't allow it to drip off. Never been opened. Oh, yes, it has. Okay. Now I got just a little bit on the edge of the paper towel, and we start wiping it on. Trying to blend the color. It'll take several applications. Starting to darken up a little bit. Starting to get darker and darker. So now we'll leave that sit on there and continue working, and we're going to do the pins. It reacts with the metal, so it doesn't blue the wood. Now, you want to neutralize that, and for that, we're going to use some Windex. Now, to neutralize the bluing compound, we're going to use Windex with ammonia D, because the ammonia neutralizes the acid that's in the bluing compound. Put it on liberally, because we'll be waxing to make it look pretty in just a minute. If you do not neutralize the bluing compound, it will go from dark to darker to rusted. So it does have to be neutralized. And then the final step. Now, when I'm doing the first initial cleaning wax, I use Howard's Butcher Block conditioner, because it seems to work pretty good for cleaning any imperfections, dust, shows up any scratches that you've got left over. And my inspector, who's currently operating the camera, will inspect the knife and tell me just exactly if I mixed any scratches. And this dull little knife is ready for inspection. All right then, this thing has passed inspection. I was going to grab the camera and show her inspecting it, but she did remind me that she had a knife. Now, next step is to sharpen it up and finish it up, and then a sheath gets made for it. That'll probably be completed next year. All right, if you enjoyed our videos, please subscribe to our page and give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, please leave them in the comment section. I will get back in touch with you either with another video or in the comment section. Have a wonderful day, folks, and Happy New Year.